Good afternoon and welcome to this month's show. I'm Luke McCormack. During today's show, we will be discussing continuous diagnostic and mitigation, also known as CDM. With me on today's show are Gary Jones, CDM Deputy Program Manager, Department of Homeland Security; Beau Hauser, Chief Information Security Officer with SBA; Sallie Sweeney, Director of Federal Cybersecurity, KPMG; Ralph Kahn, Vice President of Federal at Tanium; Jim Richberg, Field Chief Information Security Officer at Fortinet; and Willie Crenshaw, CDM Program Manager at NASA. Well, we've been on this journey for 10 years. We've evolved with data center consolidations and cloud smart and cloud first, and then, as a service, and data is the new oil, and identity management, and it's perfect timing with this issuance of the memo out of the White House at the end of May in regards to data management and ID management. And all these things kind of fit together. CDM's been on that journey, sort of protecting that environment from the guards, gates, and locks to this sort of multi-hybrid configuration. Gary, let's start with you and just talk about the state of CDM these days, and where are you guys on this journey as far as protecting this, ever-evolving environment?
Well, we have, so our first thing is you can't really manage assets that you don't know you own. So with CDM, we're trying to give you that visibility, give agencies that visibility into knowing what assets they have and tracking those assets. As of right now, we have all 23 large federal agencies exchanging data with the federal dashboard. We also have 22 of the small and micro agencies exchanging data with the federal dashboard. This happens to be the first time that the federal government is getting visibility into small and micro agencies. We're releasing our new cyber hygiene tool, agency-wide adaptive risk enumeration, affectionately known as AWARE. Agencies get better sense of and manage their cyber hygiene and to a certain degree manage their risk profile.
And really, it's incredible. The instrumentation that's available now across the spectrum is unbelievable. If you look at, when CDM started 10 years ago and where we are now, and the picture that you can sort of capture, as far as the threat landscape, it's unbelievable. So how about at SBA? What's the state over there? We were talking earlier about, SBA really on this journey and sort of proofing out a lot of these capabilities. How's it going over at SBA in regards to the CDM capability? So what do you guys got cooking over there?
Right. It's exciting for us because we're on a pretty rapid modernization initiative, and our CIO, Maria Roach, she's really staked out an ambitious strategic vision for us. And she came in, she didn't want to make incremental changes with what we have. She wanted to do something different. And so what that meant was using cloud like it hadn't been used before at the agency. And so it's exciting to really see how cloud is maturing and how much instrumentation, as you said, is available now. And it's allowing us to really look at some of these federal programs like TIC and like CDM and explore how we can use these cloud tools in a very meaningful way. And so we've started a pilot with DHS to do just that, to really take some of these native cloud tools through their paces and see how far we can stretch them to meet some of these CDM goals.
And I think that's fantastic. Look, we started on-prem, right? And the world changed, and CDM evolved with it to the point where CDM now actually has some of their tools in the cloud, as I understand, so which is kind of neat to see that. How about over at Tanium? Tell us what's happening at Tanium in regards to sort of what do you guys see out there as far as the landscape and how it's looking and how you guys are plugging into that?
So, I think CDM's made a lot of progress over the last 5 or 10 years. We've done things in the civilian side of the government that really have needed doing for a really long time, right? So the data is being collected. And I think, when you look at the life cycle of a project, kind of crawl, walk, run, CDM is definitely walking. And I think, one of the things that's really encouraging as I look at some of the guidance out of DHS and the program office is now that the agencies have kind of gone through the crawl stage and they're walking, now the trick is how do you get them running? And what we're encouraging is to look at the metrics that the agencies are using and ask questions like, hey, can we get some additional metrics that might be useful? Is the timeliness of the data where the industry is, right? Can we get them running a little faster, get the data a little quicker, make it a little more real time? Is there somebody watching the watchers? And what I mean by that is a lot of times the initial setup of a system works great and then it kind of decays over time. And now that we're walking, it's time to understand, is there that decay built in? And if there is, what do we do about it, right? So that, 5 years from now, the data we're getting is as good as the data we're getting today. Those are some of the things we're working with agencies on. The CDM program is focused on gap filling, and that, is a great opportunity to help some of the agencies not only fill gaps, but to, kind of flex their muscles a little and see if they can maybe jog on the way to running and do things a little more quickly. And, what we'd love to see is more of a real-time dashboard at CDM and at DHS proper. DHS has some new authorities, and, we'd like to see that data in real time so that the executives at DHS and across the civilian government can actually see in real time what the status and the kind of the cyber state of the civilian government is. We think that's definitely possible, and that's kind of not far over the horizon. That's definitely visible, and so that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, and look, let's face it, we're living in a real time world, right? And the fact that taking this whole community on this crawl to I would say brisk walk to the run stage, I think is monumental, and it's been a journey for sure, but there's always an evolution there. Sallie, how about over at KPMG? You guys have an interesting perspective where you're seeing sort of things across the entire community. You're also seeing it in the private sector. So give us a state of sort of, what does it look like out there currently?
From the perspective of CDM specific functionality and capabilities, I'm a huge proponent and evangelist for the CDM mission and intent. I think that outside of the CDM, program from DHS, there are pushes to get that level of visibility into assets, into identity and access management, and as well as the components that are contained within phases 3 and 4 of the Defense CDM procurement. So it's not just confined to the federal government, the state and local tribal governments, but it is something that has been something that is a complex problem that is being tackled across both public and private sectors. Now, from our perspective, we see that the key to success is to really understand the client environment. That's where we have had the most success. When you understand the client environment, leverage the investments that have already been, built around, from skill sets to processes to policies and procedures, that those technology stacks, the best idea is to leverage those existing resources in order to either enhance or build on those in order to make sure that your client's investments are used as wisely as possible, as well as, quite frankly, the federal taxpayer dollars. And so that there's not just a rip and replace, new silver bullet. That's not how we approach it. So from the perspective of our, practical experience working with CDM within some specific clients we're working with today, it is establishing common information models so that you can apply that to both legacy and newer tools to get the data feeds so that you can have those going from layer A, B, C, D, which includes the local dashboard and the federal dashboard.
Yeah, and let's face it, I think, maybe we'll talk about this in the lessons learned. I think that was one of the biggest things I think we all as a community learned in phase 1 is, rip and replace maybe is not the solution, right? There is a lot of interoperability. A lot of these tools now have gotten much more sophisticated, and the data flows much better than it used to. So I think the ability to sort of take what you have and add to it is sort of the new way of operating, if you will. Jim, how about over at Fortinet? Once again, you have a great perspective. You're seeing all this activity going on across the interagency, the smalls, the micros, the larges, et cetera. And you also have a big footprint in the private sector, let's face it. So tell us about the state of the state in regards to where you guys sit.
Okay, well, Luke, I've actually got an even broader perspective than that, because I joined Fortinet 3 months ago and have gained an appreciation for what the state of the art in the private sector is. But prior to that, I've spent 34 years in federal service, the last 10 years of which I was the National Intelligence Manager for Cyber. I was the one who oversaw the comprehensive national cybersecurity initiative. So to the point raised earlier, 10 years ago, we weren't even crawling. We were lying in our cribs, squalling about this. We had some specific department and agency-driven solutions, but they were all government-created solutions. Now we've gotten to the point where we've got the DHS program, we've got phases that actually help us address a lot of the problems we used to deal with at the senior interagency level. I can't tell you how many deputies committee meetings where we started by saying, okay, what is our exposure across government on this? And we collectively had to do the shoulder shrug and say, we don't know. And by the way, no one has the authority to figure that out. So we've moved from the inability to answer those questions to saying, look, we're now going to leverage mature commercial solutions that are out there that allow you to address this. The holy grail that we were chasing for most of the last 10 years in government was we wanted a common operating picture. We wanted shared situational awareness. We actually had initiatives in the CNCI focused on building the tools for that. It was very slow going, and this is the type of solution that CDM will actually, if you look at phase 1 and phase 2, allow you to start saying, I see what we have, I know we have automated ways to deal with it. And now that I'm at Fortinet, I joke that I wish I could put a speech together that says, things I've learned since joining the private sector about cyber that I wish I'd known while I was still in the senior ranks of government, because there actually are some very mature solutions in these ecosystems that, irrespective of whether this is coming from a bring your own device perspective or an IoT perspective or something in the cloud, actually allow you to see activity, broad, integrated, automated ability to see something hitting you anywhere, and the you can be not only your organization, but anyone else who's in that ecosystem, make sense of it and push something out across that fabric. And that's something that we aspired to do in government, and we frankly were never able to do. But there are COTS solutions that I think the CDM contract will allow us to start buying into to solve incrementally.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest wins, right, is the fact that they're taking available, this commercially available capability and now introducing it into sort of the federal markets space and be able to implement it in a way that stitches it all together, rolls it up with the dashboard, et cetera. Willie, how about over at NASA? Tell us a little bit about how we're doing with CDM over there. Are we going to have CDM on the dark side of the moon? What's happening here?
I don't know about that, but CDM is, one of the things at NASA. CDM, we fully embraced the program from the beginning. So we've deployed phase 1 and 2 around 98%, almost 100% into our network in production. One reason we did that, we saw the advantage early on, being one of the first 4 agencies to kind of hop on the CDM in 2013. One of the things that we looked at with NASA was how can we, with such a large, diverse environment, network environment, find tools that'll be able to give us what we need as far as the data. We already had some tools all over, NASA. So we standardized on the one that came with CDM, but it wasn't nothing new to NASA. It was already in our environment in one of our centers. So we expanded that. So CDM has been a success for us, and it continues to be as it continues to give us the data we didn't have before, but also the funding. I think a lot of, the technology's there, the technology's available, but it's the funding. And one of the reasons CDM was a success, it came with funding, and it allowed us to keep our own funding within OCIO at NASA so that we'll be able to continue to do other things as well as meet the CDM requirements.
Really cleaned up a lot of stuff and then gave the agencies a little bit of runway to plan for sort of the funding into the future as well, which I think was really successful and really important. Well, we always like to talk about a specific program. We're going to start with you at SBA, Beau. You guys are doing some really advanced things over there. Tell us about a specific program that you're working on that may be of interest to the listening audience.
So I'll give some details around the CDM pilot that we're doing.
Right.
It's a 90-day pilot, and to still align from a movie, we're in the end game now. So we're finishing that up in the next couple of weeks, and we'll be writing a report and sharing that out to folks. But really what we found is, it's a cloud-based pilot using those native cloud tools. And so what we've been able to do, we know that data aggregation is a challenge in a lot of areas when you're taking different tools and you're trying to create a unified picture. So using the cloud and really more than that, using the big data concepts that are simpler in the cloud, we were able to aggregate 6 different data sets into one view. And we did that in 30 days. That was the first 30 days of the pilot. And so again, when you get away from the constraints that traditional databases have, it allows you to really simplify some of these challenges that we face. And then the second phase was, the next 30 days was visualizing that data. And so we're working through that now, and we've been able to really demonstrate that that these tools and capabilities are very beneficial in really taking things to the next level. The next thing that's really compelling for me is we did this without spinning up a single virtual machine, right? We did this using the services available through the license that we pay for our cloud service, and then we also have business intelligence tools that we can run on top of the data to get into things like scoring, the aware score and things like that. To even get to that level. So it's been really, really eye-opening, and we hope that the community, once we write this report and share this out, that not only DHS benefits from a roadmap perspective, but the community benefits too, and learns a lot of options that they can use going forward.
When is that pilot going to be completed?
So we're in the next couple of weeks. We'll be finalizing the technical phases, and then we'll be in that writing phase, writing the reports. So within the next couple of weeks.
That sounds fantastic. And how long did it take you to implement that? Just to get it up and running?
We're now ingesting. So part of the modernization initiative that I mentioned before, we kind of turned our model upside down, and we started feeding all of our log data into the cloud. We're ingesting 400 gigs a day into our cloud tools, again, without running a single virtual machine, using those cloud services. So that gave us a head start on being able to do the CDM pilot, and that's why we could jump right into it, do 90 days, and again, it was about aggregating these specific details we needed and then visualizing that.
Very on-demand type capability, SBA out in front shaking this stuff out. Well, we're going to take a short break, but we'll be right back. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. With me on today's show are Gary Jones, Department of Homeland Security, Willie Crenshaw with NASA, Beau Hauser with SBA, Sallie Sweeney, KPMG, Ralph Kahn with Tanium, and Jim Richberg with Fortinet. We were talking about specific programs for CDN. Sallie, I'm going to ask you, give us an example. Maybe you want to highlight a specific program that you guys are working on or been involved in implementing in regards to CDM.
Sure. We're supporting CMS right now in their maturing of their Splunk implementation. So we have specifically the charge to make sure that we have a consistent and unified model to establish data feeds that then can be propagated throughout the rest of the enterprise. CMS is one of the largest entities that has 50 odd data centers across the United States, most of which are run by contractor owned, contractor operated, the COCO model. You then have to make sure you have a strategy for rolling that out in a way that will be successful across all these different data centers, which is a formidable task. So we are working on right now making sure that there is a successful model that includes that common information model at the Baltimore data center internally at their towards their headquarters, CMS's headquarters, in order to then begin rolling that out across the country. So from the success story standpoint, CMS is very dedicated and very passionate about making sure that their CDM functionality works from their existing investments, utilizing professional services. Our role has been to enhance the leadership because KPMG not being a system integrator, we are there to provide the thought leadership, to provide the high level heavy lifting architecture and engineering to support our federal counterparts, as well as to guide and oversee system integrators, professional services providers, in order to make sure there is consistency and meeting budgets, meeting deadlines that the government has set forth.
And look, let's face it, that's a huge task. CMS, I don't think people realize just how significant, large, complex they are over there. So that's fantastic to hear that. Gary, how about at DHS? Can you give us an example of a specific program you'd like to highlight and sort of communicate out there to the listening audience?
Sure. So Beau kind of stole some of our thunder there with the SBA pilot, but that's one of our collaboration efforts with SBA that we're very proud of, that we're working on with them. Also with CDM, we're definitely working on closing the gaps with the agencies. We're using the asset management, which is formerly known as Phase 1. Everyone keeps referring to it as Phase 1, but we refer to it as asset management. Identity and access management, which is formerly known as Phase 2. So we're trying to close those gaps to really address the visibility issue in the agencies. Also, the final thing on this is getting Defend out. We're really trying to get the Defend task orders out, making sure.
Give us 30 seconds on what's Defend for those that might not know.
Well, Defend is the contract vehicle that we are using. We have 6 task orders on it that we use to get the tools and sensors, the commercial off-the-shelf tools, out to the agencies to provide them visibility. We've implemented request for service, which is a RFS. Some folks know that, and that's another vehicle to get tools to the agencies to help them be more flexible in what tools they want, what capabilities they want. But I think we're getting to a point now where we're seeing how modular CDM can be. That you don't need, as you touched on it earlier, you don't need to necessarily rip and replace.
Right.
But you can add to what you have, and you can, make it a lot more flexible.
Right. I mean, you can kind of, in this Lego block, kind of snap it in type thing. And somebody was talking about, crawl, walk, run. And there's different levels of sophistication when we're all learning how to crawl and walk, right? And bringing that up to network in regards to what's on the network or, who's on your network. Sallie.
So I think the exciting part about the Defend procurement structure, having been my previous life, I was at GDIT, and I was technical lead for our solutions going after those prime opportunities for some of the CDM groups procurements last year or 2 years ago now. It's been so. That tells you what times happens when you're dealing with the $700 million deal. But the difference with the defend procurement that I think has been important for the agencies to see and hear is that they're focusing on, as Gary was saying, not phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, but, turning towards, the nomenclature of asset management, identity and access management, and also really pushing into and focusing on the priority of providing capabilities. Right? Which provides flexibility, because a lot of times these agencies love their programs they already had in place for years and years and years. They love them. They love their tools. We're already doing it. We're already doing vulnerability and asset management, configuration management. Don't mess up our party.
Sure.
And so those capabilities are already in place. So therefore, hooray, check. You can just then work to then make sure that's appropriately feeding into the dashboard so that there's visibility at the top levels and at the bureau level.
Bolt these things on.
Bingo.
Willie, you had a...
Yeah, I want to make sure that we don't confuse some things. There seems to be some confusion out there in the IT world about what CDM phase 1 and 2, what it was.
Sure.
CDM at its inception was a gap filler program. Mm-hmm. That's the way it was built. That's the way it was put out there. It was never to come in and rip and replace anything out of your network. It was to come and see what did agencies have, what was the sticking point, and then fill it. Defend continues that. Defend just allow, because I hear a lot, well, we feel that Defend is more flexible. CDM has always been flexible. What happened was when you had this at its infancy, you only had a few agencies that jumped on board with CDM. So those agencies got together and decided what phase 1 and 2 would be and what was the best breed of tools at that time for us to utilize and implement to gain asset management and identity management. So
right. I think the whole community has been on this journey and sort of adapting, right? You can give each agency a tool and they're all going to use it a little bit differently, right? Depending on sort of where they're starting from. Ralph, how about over at Tanium? Tell us a little bit about maybe a specific program that you guys are focused on that you'd like to highlight.
So we support a lot of civilian customers. Data from our tool does feed the CDM dashboard through various processes at customers. DHS, I think, is, so the components of DHS that we support are probably ones that would come to mind there. They seem to be embracing more aggressive metrics and an ability to move kind of towards more metrics, more accurate metrics, and faster data. Same thing for Postal, SSA, State Department, places like that are all really taking the boost they got from the CDM program and using that as kind of momentum to carry them forward faster. So that would be kind of where I would say that we're doing most of our stuff.
A lot of good example of a product that's being snapped in and being adapted widely, right? Rolling up to the dashboard, et cetera, which is super important. Willie, you guys were an early adopter, right, as you were describing. You want to talk about maybe a specific program that you're sort of currently in the middle of implementing that would be something that is...
Sure. I mean, so we looked at CDM as an opportunity to help our risk management program overall, in totality. So our security program, if you will, or risk management program, is really entwined with CDM and the capabilities that CDM provides, not just because it's more to us than just tools. We work closely with DHS currently on the Defend, so we're going fully into Defend, and we're helping to drive what those requirements would be and what they look like, because we can utilize the first parts of CDM that we did with the asset management, identity management, to now look at the total package, the holistic view of what does management see? What is Renee Wynn, our CIO, able to see as far as making decisions? What is the A-suite, Mr. Bridenstine, our administrator, what is he able to see?
What do they need to see?
What do they need to see? So it's multiple projects under that CDM umbrella with dashboards, risk management, and then we continue to tweak the tools to give us the asset management, identity management information that we need. So
right, so it's just taking the outcomes of all this capability and weaving it into your whole risk management portfolio, if you will, and then bringing up to a higher order all the way up to the administrator down to everyone else that
and
needs
then also
it, right?
the down right, and also the down and in.
Yeah.
For the administrators, the IT administrators to be able to make decisions at their level. So we're looking at risk management at each level and the information that's needed in order to make sure we're more secure.
Sure, it was always, look, it's hard to defend something when you don't know what you're, sort of dealing with, and we've sort of gone beyond that now into this higher order capability where we can really make good risk profile decisions. Ralph, you want to make a
Yeah, I
comment?
just want to piggyback on what Willie said. Risk is definitely where the agencies are going, and I think where industry is going. And when you think about risk, it's really difficult to assess risk unless you have really good data and timely data, right?
Bingo,
So the
right.
agencies are moving from kind of good to better to best, and CDM is helping them get there, right? When they started CDM, I'm not even sure you could really characterize the data as good, right? And when they got through asset management, I'm going to try to use the right words here, they got to better, and I think they're moving towards best, right?
Sure.
Best is really accurate, it's really timely, and it allows you to assess risk on something more than kind of a weekly or monthly basis, but even on a minute by minute, hour by hour would kind of be the penultimate gold standard, right? If somebody was able to watch dynamically and see what risk they had and then address them really quickly, you make it a lot harder for the adversary to take advantage of any weaknesses you may have. And at the end of the day, that's what this is all about, right? Hardening the target so the adversary has a much harder time doing harm to the U.S. and its agencies.
Yeah, and I think that was part of that crawl, walk, run, right? I mean, now we have the data, and now we have to start to get a lot more sophisticated about the quality of the data, et cetera. Gary, you wanted to make a comment.
Right. So we're touching on the data, and that's a big initiative in CDM right now. We are really focusing on the data consistency. I know a lot of people talk about the data quality. I think we're definitely getting to much better quality, but our data is consistent. We want to make sure that data is consistent. It's giving you the right indicators to address your risk posture. We're delivering those capabilities. I think one of our biggest initiatives right now is definitely to work on the data quality and data consistency.
Jim, let's go down to you at Fortinet and talk about just a specific program. You've seen a lot of different things, right, from both sides of the fence. Give us an example of a program that you'd like to bring to light here.
So a riff on the theme that everybody's been talking about of metrics and data is I've been accused of being a numbers zealot almost, in the sense that in cybersecurity, if you can't measure it, you can't drive improvement. And you're doing something either because it's faith-based, it feels like the right thing to do, or there are carrots and sticks. If I don't do this, bad things will happen, or good things. I'll be immunized if I tried and I failed. One of the things that I've been excited about when I came to Fortinet was to realize that not only do we have data coming at us from all sides, but we have a single pane of glass way to put it together, that you have the ability to use different overlays to be able to do this kind of continuous diagnostic in real time. And the part that particularly intrigued me was we have a security rating service overlay that you can put on that, so that not only do you know the state of threat, the state of vulnerability, but you can add additional overlays to that let you say, so fill in the blank, is it FISMA, is it PCI, is it HIPAA compliant? In real time, you can actually look at and then mitigate threats coming at you from those different kinds of compliance regimes. And that's a different spin on the ability to make something better than to just say, I see a threat, I see a vulnerability, and I'm mitigating that.
Right, and it's extremely powerful to be able to do that. Also, the scoring capability, right, as far as a risk matrix, I think is really significant. Well, we love to talk about lessons learned here. Gary, I'm going to start with you and just give us an example of sort of a lessons learned, some of the things that you're seeing out there that would be important as everyone sort of goes on this journey that would be of interest to folks, so that they can course correct if they need to. So
one of our big lessons learned from CDM is the ability to be a little bit more versatile in our dashboard. We've just awarded our new dashboard contract. I believe it was probably a few days ago. And it's so with that award, we're focusing on building a new suite of integrated tools and products to make a more of a dashboard ecosystem. I've heard a few people mention that at the panel right now, but it is going to make the dashboard a little bit more versatile. It's going to be a little bit more user-friendly, give you the data that you need in better performance, and we're focusing on that. As far as another lesson learned, with Defend, we put it out to a longer period of time. Mm-hmm. This is not an easy job, so we have to put more time in to get the technology correct and get the technology implemented into agencies. So we put a 6-year time period on Defend. We've also learned that I've touched on the RFSs, the request for service, flexibility. We need flexibility to deliver products and services to the agencies. So with the advent of RFSs, we're able to take what the agency needs, take their requirements, and provide them the products that really would help them improve their risk posture.
And the fact that service-based should be able to implement those things very quickly, which is awesome. Ralph, how about at Tanium? Any lessons learned, pluses and minuses that you'd like to share?
So I wanted to go back to something that kind of Gary mentioned, that a lot of these things, to do it right, take time, but it's also important to acknowledge that things change over time, right? I think if you look back at when CDM started, the tools that were selected back then were great at the time, but we're 5 or 6 years in, right? The industry's moved forward, technology's moved forward. In cyber, 100%. 5 or 6 minutes is a lot of time, not 5 or 6 years. And so, one of the things as we get to approach kind of the running phase is a ability to kind of evaluate, as Jim said, how effective are the things that we're using, and are there more effective things, and how can we quickly identify what those are, try them out, adopt them, and acquire them and adopt them, right? How can we increase the cycle time with which we say, hey, the tool that we were using 2 years ago, maybe it doesn't cut it now. So how can CDM help the agencies cut the cycle time from finding the new thing that they need to getting it in and getting it operational from 3 to 5 years, maybe to 6 months or something? I know that's a big one, right? That's pretty fast. But I'm just saying that as we look at things, the adversaries get to change their tactics daily if they want to. We've got to be able to change equally quickly. And so as we look to the run phase, that's a lesson learned for me, right? We got to continually be kind of compressing the time it takes us to do those things.
Got to be able to snap it in and snap it out. Well, we're going to take a short break, but we'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. With me on today's show are Gary Jones, Department of Homeland Security, Willie Crenshaw with NASA, Beau Hauser with the SBA, Sallie Sweeney with KPMG, Ralph Kahn with Tanium, and Jim Richberg with Fortinet. We were talking about lessons learned with CDM. Willie, NASA was an early adopter. I'm sure you got a lot of lessons learned, pluses and minuses. Give us one lesson learned that you'd like to share.
On the plus side, make sure you get your management, your top management in your agency involved early on in understanding what CDM and what you're doing as far as the cyber. On the negative side is to make sure that you have the funding in the out years. CDM, Defend, and all of this is the first procurement year plus one, so it's about 2 years. So you need to make sure that in order to maintain these capabilities, that you have the funding in the out years. Jim and I was just talking. The government can't move from an integration standpoint every 6 months to a new tool.
Impossible.
So
right?
Yeah, so we have to kind of plan that out and put it in the framework going forward to make sure that we're able to maneuver and put in new products and keep everything fresh.
Sallie, how about at KPMG? One lesson learned there.
Willie was, speaking my language over there. I asked Kevin Cox during a panel that I moderated the same question about, on a CDM panel, same question about funding, because we've had a lot of people asking about how long does this,
Sure.
I'm doing air quotes, free money last. We get the free money from DHS. And as Willie said, the option year plus one. So I think that's really important to emphasize that everyone is very clear about what funding is available, how long, what's the total, cost of investment for, there is a requirement for agencies to budget in security. So it shouldn't be a surprise, right? You should already be thinking this way, but some agencies are more mature than others in their, in that journey. But I do think it's important to make sure that agencies are aware of the funding availability and to then budget in their internal budgets for the total cost of ownership for their, CDM investments. I also think it is important to have good, promote a good, healthy culture internally so that, it's not just the, security team that owns CDM. It has to be a culture within the agency that everyone understands, obviously from the top down, but to your data center, to your application development team, to your, to your network guys, to your DBAs, everybody to understand their role in making sure that, obviously the ultimate, goal is to have security built in at the SDLC level before you even get into production. But the key is to have that culture built in so that everyone understands the benefit of what you get from having your data fed to your local and federal dashboards.
Sure, whole community's got to be involved, got to plan accordingly. Beau, you've been at this for a while over at SBA. Give us a lesson learned.
So one, like I mentioned before, the native cloud tools really simplify a lot of the challenges that we deal with from an on-prem perspective, but you have to integrate your on-prem tools. You can't do it all with those native cloud services. And then the second one I'll highlight is with the cloud, there's still a struggle with how folks think about the cloud, and there's a tendency to go straight to the point where you're going to spin up some servers and load the software and kind of do it the way that we understand from our on-prem mentality. And we have to work hard to change that thought process so that we're really pushing cloud service providers to build these services into the fabric of the cloud because it simplifies our maintenance and it lowers our costs and simplifies the IT management too.
Yeah, that was a big shift, moving into that journey, not only for the agencies to go into there and then adopt the CDM capabilities, but for the cloud providers to then incorporate that, fuse it together. Jim, how about over at Fortinet? You've got, again, a long career here, and you've been at this a while as well, on both sides of the fence, so to speak. Give us a lesson learned, a plus or a minus there.
So look, I'll give you a quick two-parter. And the first is there are not one-size-fits-all turnkey solutions. And the second is trust but verify. We've got an approved products list that says here are things that dovetail under the CDM umbrella. But to Willie's point, that doesn't absolve the departments from doing their homework to say, what am I actually trying to solve? Because it's not a matter of saying I take one from column A, one from column B, one from column C, I'm done. You need to define your requirement, then you need to actually work with the vendor to figure out if that's actually the best mix of tools to do the job. And the second part of that is you really would like to find independent testing about the efficacy of the product. You don't want to get into implementation and then find out that the specifications in the APL were best case. You want to find out what real world performance is or do a pilot yourself so that you don't get halfway down that implementation path and find out that I've got an approved tool, but it simply doesn't scale appropriately with my problem.
Trust but verify always rules the day. All right, we're going to wrap it up here. We got a little bit less than 12 minutes. We want to just talk about sort of, what does the future look like? If we could fast forward a little bit, we're going to start with you, Willie. What does the future look like in regards to the CDM program at NASA?
I see the CDM program being more utilized with, throughout, all of NASA. Right now it's there. I see it as a bigger piece than just the capabilities and tools and things of that. So it's really the federal government cybersecurity program and risk management program. Because you're talking about policies, you're talking about the capabilities, the tools. I think everyone focuses on the technical side of the world, but we're looking at more than just technical. As far as NASA is concerned, we're going to the moon in 4 years. So we have to be able to be agile and be flexible as to what capabilities we look at within the agency to meet that. But also, what are the other things as ongoing authorization, the FISMA laws, all of that, the data that we have to feed to meet FISMA and IG reports and GAO reports, all of those things encompassed within CDM as a program, not necessarily as just a vehicle in order to gain tools and services.
Right. It's sort of the extract of the data coming out of those programs and the use of that information. Jim, how about over at Fortinet? What does the future look like when you guys sort of peer out there?
So I actually think that CDM has close parallels to where the high-end managed security service providers are going in terms of their ability to provide these, call them gated communities, if you will, where you have good situational awareness of what's coming at you, the ability to see it one place, block it every place, do preventative action. So I think we're getting to the position where CDM, fully built out, will give government that kind of capability. You'll have these islands of excellence in the private sector. And I think one of the things that underlies this, and I'll riff off of Willie being from NASA, is what is the rocket fuel that drives AI and machine learning's ability to do all of this? And that's big data. And this is something where the data that feeds CDM, the data that the defender has, is something that I think is a comparative advantage that we bring to the table. We're looking at parts of the ecosystem now that look at hundreds of billions to 1 trillion security events a day. That's a lot of training data for an AI and ML program. And that's something that somebody who's a malicious actor coming at us would be hard pressed to be able to match.
Right, and this persistent capability that's available, and not only the data to feed CDM, but the data that CDM produces, right, is pretty incredible. And the fact that you got to, manage bots and things of this nature, it just gets just a whole different level of capability that wasn't really thought about during the conception of that program. Sallie, tell us about the future as far as KPMG sits, and what does that look like? What's the forecast there?
I believe that the future for this is going to be a more proactive ability to have two-way communication from the top level down to the agencies and into their different divisions. That rapid communication will allow us to be more advanced in not, completely stopping or eliminating the threats, but getting in front of them more proactively. So threat hunting capabilities, better threat intelligence to be rolled into, these, all of these different pieces of data that we're collecting as part of CDM, so that you have that proactive component that then overlays the kind of pulse and heartbeat that's going on internally within each agency. So I think that deeper, richer data in another 5-10 years from the more proactive side will then allow for the CDM program, which is really intended to be the, I hate to keep saying it, but the single pane of glass for these agencies in order to give leadership the real-time risk perspective, not just from a static perspective or not just from a compliance perspective or from vulnerabilities, but from how quickly are we getting in front of truly bad stuff to our high-value assets.
Yeah, and it's always an interesting dynamic of bringing in some of that intelligence information and sort of incorporating that into these tools to allow them to be more effective. And there's obviously, being from the IC, et cetera, it's a delicate balance there. Ralph, how about at Tanium? If you wanted to sort of, fast forward here and look at the future, what does that look like in regards to, what Tanium's cooking up? What do you guys got in the Petri dish there? What are you signaling out there, or what's being signaled to you as far as, capabilities?
So regardless of whether it's Tanium's involved or not, what I'm hoping for the future of CDM is a world where agency leadership can see in real time the status and risks going on in their environment. They can then decide in real time what action they want to take and implement that action so that they can begin to engage with the cyber adversary at the speed and scale the cyber adversary is engaging with them. At the same time, because the environment changes really rapidly, those same executives should have the ability to identify the change, determine what tools or technologies they need, and rapidly test them, acquire them, and deploy them. I think that's going to be critical. We need to break that cycle where things take years and years to kind of prove out. We really need to kind of go into a more of a spin model where we bring it in, we try it, we productionize it kind of on the run, and we acquire it very quickly. So for me, that's where I hope the government goes.
Yeah, and I think the fact that we're so much of this now is software based gives us the capability to test these things out and do a microdose sample, if you will, and then based on that we can scale it very quickly. Jim, I think you were going to mention something.
Yeah, to build on Ralph's point, I think what you need to do is automate the mitigation part of this. It's one thing to say I want to give the agency head real-time warning of something, but you also want to basically automate to the extent that you can your response. Something happens. Do I want to allow it? Do I want to allow it and warn on it? Do I want to block it and warn on it? You can bake a lot of that in so that, yes, when the boss comes in the next day, they get a report that says, here's what happened overnight. But if you're really trying to respond at machine speed, you want to focus on the ability to automate this to the extent that you can move
right,
forward.
And sort of knock down the noise, if you will, and get up to some of these higher order, more up the value chain. And that gets into, I think, being able to trust the information that you're getting, that type of thing, and being able to trust that, the non-human, if you will, is going to respond appropriately, et cetera, et cetera. Now, how about at SBA? Well, what's the future look like in regards to the implementation of this capability?
So we mentioned AI and machine learning. One of the challenges there is our adversaries are also using that, right, to improve their attack capabilities. But I think the future and the next transformation of cybersecurity is really going to rely on our ability as a community to really build that partnership among organizations and get past the reservations that we have today when it comes to sharing cybersecurity information. We got to get to a point where information sharing is seamless and automated, and we're all comfortable with it, so that an attack or even an attempted attack on any one of us equals near-time protection for everyone, and really drive up the cost of those attacks for our adversaries.
And I think, the reality is, one is being aware of it, two is being able to do something about it. And this gets back to, I think, some of that automation, right? I mean, realistically, at some point we have to continue to implement an automated type of response capability to some of these things to be realistic about how we're going to be able to respond in an appropriate manner and do it in a timely manner, right? I think that's really important. Gary, how about at DHS? If you could sort of look at, CDM Phase 5 or whatever you want to call it, what does that look like in 3 years? We've gone through, we've knocked out some of the stuff, we've done the defend stuff, we've implemented, the ICAM capability, we've got a level of sophistication, and sort of, what are you guys thinking about? What's next? What's sort of over the horizon that you're...
So some of the panelists, they've really touched on some of the key pieces of what CDM is looking for in the future. As an engineer, I salivate when you say machine learning and AI, and bringing that to the forefront. That is one of the things that we're definitely looking to help inform the decision makers. Automation is definitely a key part of it. Automating with Willie mentioning ongoing assessment, ongoing authorization, those capabilities. CDM's really looking to be flexible, dynamic, and Beau mentioned collaboration. That's kind of what CDM is all about. We always tend to conflate the program of CDM, which supplies, gives you the great prices on the tools and the products and everything else, but we forget about the system, which supplies the data and informs the leaders that what your risk is and what your risk posture is. So I think the future of CDM is to still maintain that program and give you that benefit of those products, but also enhance the system where the data becomes really that real-time, consistent quality, and push out the aware cyber hygiene algorithm to really inform the leaders.
Well, the future looks bright, and I really want to thank you all today for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us for this program. I'd like to thank the sponsors for Without We Don't Have a Show. I'd like to thank the good people here at Federal News Network that make our program so successful and enjoyable. And most of all, I'd like to thank the listening audience out there that tune in every month. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network.